Welcome everybody. I am delighted to be presenting to you today on family dynamics. This is an area that I'm very passionate about and have been working in for many years on my journey, initially as a CPA, then as a financial advisor, and in my career over the last 15 years as the founder of DNA Behaviour International. So a lot of what I'm going to talk to you today about is our very concrete process of helping families understand who they are, who each family member is, and how they can build a family continuity plan so that there is a sustainable passing down of their wealth over the longer term to meet their goals and desires in that area, to keep everybody in the family happy, but also for there to be a passing down of the family values as well. I know that some of you on the call today are wealth mentors in terms of being trained in our systems already and know something about financial DNA. So today is not a complete financial DNA lesson. More what it is a practical approach to how any of you can serve a family as the wealth mentor to guide them to be more behaviourally smart and better manage the family dynamics, or as we say, close the relative gap. So here's a sort of fairly technical definition of family continuity, and without reading all the words, the practical measurement in my view of succeeding with a family continuity plan is, can everybody in the family sit around the table at Thanksgiving and celebrate together and be happy, be having open conversations with each other about their lives and about their money. And if you can do that, then anything else is possible. When there is a breakdown in the family relationships, that will become harder and people start to nitpick over whether the family beach house was kept clean, whether someone dirtied mum's antique pillow, the family jewelry and whatnot. It all happens. But at the end of the day, it is about being able to build great family relationships, and our belief is then anything can happen thereafter. Of course, within families, and this happens even in my own family, I have a younger brother and was brought up by my mother. We're a smaller family at one level, but part of obviously a bigger family. But everybody has different expectations, and they have different belief systems. And of course, this happens when each of us get married. That one believes or thinks certain things are going to happen and has certain levels of entitlement. And there's no doubt that expectations and entitlements are two of the biggest issues that have to be dealt with here if there's going to be successful dealing with the family wealth. There is very powerful research that probably all of you know something of in terms of the difficulties in passing wealth down through the families. There's no doubt it's a highly emotive issue, and it is clearly coming from the different personalities within the family, breakdowns in communication and trust over the years. I think that the best research that I've read, and I like things in books to be able to read and understand the processes, but you can go and get the Williams and Priest research, and they wrote a really good book as well that brings all of this out. Also at the bottom there, in terms of the US Trust research, I do think it's great if the family members can be introduced to the professional advisors who are going to be helping them manage the wealth, whether that's the accountants, lawyers, and of course the financial advisors who are dealing with the investments. And I think that's the trick for all of you, on the call today, particularly if you're a financial advisor, is how do you get close to the family members down through the generations so that you can serve them. You know, one of the issues that I will bring up as well is conflicts of interest as well can be an issue. So whilst you know, this is sort of a little bit being contradictory here, but one of the things that I found is sometimes that the professional advisor that has advised the patriarch or matriarch in the family can be so close to that person and maybe even one of the children, but is not as close to some of the other children, and there's an imbalance there in the relationships, which makes it harder sometimes in really getting to the core issues and building the trust. And this is where there is a great role for an independent facilitator to step in to help address all of the issues without as much conflict of interest, whether that conflict of interest is financial or actually just emotional. So this is one of my favorite graphs as well, because you know, great results can be achieved if we have all of the family members sitting at the table, working together, and all the blockages unlocked.
I'm going to take a quick poll question here, break that we'll have throughout the presentation, just to get a temperature check on where everybody is. So first off, who out there is currently using a behavioral finance tool? And we'll give everyone a chance to respond and just see where everybody is at the moment. And once we have a good cross-section of folks, we'll go ahead and close the polls up and share the results. And about half using a finance tool, and certainly, you know, if you're familiar with ours, great. There are other techniques and tools that folks use in their businesses and firms regularly that it may not consider a behavioral finance tool, but nonetheless, it helps you when engaging clients and families nonetheless. We'll go ahead and move on with our presentation.
There's no doubt, just following up from Tripp's question, that our approach, as I said in my introduction, is very structured and concrete in the use of the financial DNA discovery process, which I will be demonstrating and how it's used in the family dynamic setting in a moment. And there are others of you that may prefer not to use a process like financial DNA and may just do it through asking a series of questions. But I do think, whether you use the tool or not, the type of process that I'm going to talk about today in terms of facilitation is very important in terms of the steps, because that is, in my mind, relatively generic, whether or not you're using a tool. So what is the primary issue inside every family is to recognize that every person is different. And I mentioned at the start that I have a younger brother who is 15 months younger than me. You can guess that I am the accountant, business person, entrepreneur in the family, although I sort of had my life revolution when I went to the human behavior side and somewhat threw out the numbers for a little while, although today I balance both out because you know, we do financial work as well, but not financial planning. We more do work in managing money inside a fund using behavioural techniques, which is a different issue. But the point being, I'm the entrepreneur. My brother is a paediatrician, and we are polar opposite. And you can bet that in terms of dealing with the family wealth that we have in our family, our attitudes to it are completely different. And we were, as I said, we were brought up by our mother because my father died when I was 1. And my brother looks at my mother and how she accumulated family wealth completely differently to me. Our needs for it are completely different, and our attitudes. You know, to make that concrete, my mother was very good at handling money, very shrewd in making investments, ran a very sound business, and is extremely tight with her money in terms of savings. She's also generous when it's needed. My brother doesn't see it, I don't believe, from what he has said to me, the same way, and can't understand why she's so tight with her money. From my side, I perfectly understand it that, if you don't have a budget and you don't save some money and put it away for tomorrow, there's a problem. But, you can start to see where these different attitudes all start to emerge, and people then from that have different expectations and entitlement, and that will all flow through to the grandchildren as well. And so it's important at the end of the day to understand, it's not that whether I'm right or my brother's right or my mother's right. It's more understanding what our behavioural styles are, and knowing where these thoughts and beliefs and motivations are all coming from, because it makes it easier to deal with. And that's why I love this business of dealing with human behaviour, because it helps really make so much more sense of the money. And that's why I often use the expression behaviouralizing money, because the money is a reflection of our human emotions. How we deal with it is a reflection of our human emotions. And all of this is really true regardless of how much money there is inside the family. I don't need to publish that in terms of my own family today, but really whether the family's got a smaller amount of money or it's got hundreds of millions of dollars, these issues are all sitting there in some way. Of course, when the family is wealthier, it can be more complex from a financial, legal, and accounting perspective, and some of it can be magnified. But nevertheless, the innate human behavioural issues are there, and they can absolutely get in the way of family relationships. So what's the model that we work from is firstly understanding the different behaviours in the family unit. So that's understanding every person that's going to be affected by the family succession planning decision making. And then, we work from the model of having understanding, acceptance, and respect. This is really not dissimilar to team building, actually. If you can understand how people are wired differently, accept those differences, and then respect them, then you can go a long way to building trust. And it's also important that the family is committed to some similar goals, and that's why often family facilitation processes focus on areas like philanthropy, because that's a goal and an area that everybody can commit to and bind themselves around. So commitment to a goal and to a purpose is important. By understanding the differences, then there can be better communication, and that's what it really then builds the trust and then the unity and alignment, so that there can then in the longer term be a family continuity plan. As I'll say later, just having a will and a documented succession plan that's drafted up by a lawyer, it won't work. That will fail the day that the patriarch or matriarch die, and that's when the litigation starts. And really what we're about is open conversations while everybody is alive, or at least enough of them to ensure that everybody's on the same page and not leaving things to chance. So what are the 6 pillars of family continuity, the approach that we adopt? And I've sort of lined it out in a very concrete way. So if I'm going to be the family appointed as the independent family facilitator to a family, or that any of you are, these are the 6 steps that I would have you focus on, roughly in this order as well, depending on, of course, what's at stake inside the family. And, it always is more complicated if there's a family business involved. But, step 1 here in the blue pillar is just getting an understanding of who every family member is, what their financial personality is, what their personal goals are. Do they, in fact, have a life purpose of their own? What I've found is amazing inside families, that when one or more of the family members, whether it's the parents or the children, don't have clarity of life purpose, it's amazing how, and confidence in their own life, and in a way, independence in their own life, in who they are. I mean, you can have that and be a school teacher, or a forestry worker or a lawyer. It doesn't really matter. But if you don't have that purpose, it's amazing how you're waiting for people in the family to die. You have expectations and entitlements as to what you're going to get. And that's what often causes a lot of the problems. So very concretely, starting off with mum and dad or patriarch and matriarch, we want to know who everybody is and have very strong buy-in to that. And nothing should happen until that is understood. And, of course, in our world at DNA Behavior, we deploy the financial DNA discovery process that I'll show you more concretely in a minute to help with that end to end. So that's really a personal facilitation of every key family member. Once there's an alignment there and that we're able to, hear everybody and what they've got to say, and there's enough confidence there, then we would move forward to step 2. What I'd also say is that, the way we've designed our process is that you don't need to be a psychologist to do it. We've trained lots of financial advisors, lawyers, accountants, family consultants around the United States and worldwide in these systems, and they're not all psychologists. So we have built this so that it's not dependent on the psychologist. But what I would say is that you need to use your awareness that if there is a mental illness issue in the family that's important, or drug or alcohol abuse is very high, or some other major trust has been breached, then I think you do need to bring in a specialist, mental health or psychologist to deal with that issue. And of course, I have a pool of those people that I can refer any family to, because otherwise you're not going to be able to move forward if those blockages aren't dealt with. So step 2 is then really getting to the family purpose, and this is really when you're bringing the family together and wanting to build family unity around something that every family member can be passionate about. And this is where I said before that philanthropy is important. In fact, in my family, it's around cricket. The one thing that my brother and I don't have any really major disagreements on too many things, even though we're extremely different and we live our lives very differently. But where we are mutually very passionate is in the area of cricket, which is sort of a historic thing in our family. And also education is something that is extremely important. And in my own family unit with my wife, we're very passionate about education and youth development type programs. And that's something that we're doing a lot more of in the DNA Behavior business, because everyone is pretty much on the, can sign up for that and believe in it. So, it's really at the end of the day uncovering what the purpose is of the family, what the mission is, how do we want to live our lives, and then, potentially where is some of the money going to go. And, as well, what comes out in this is some people want the family wealth to be held together in sort of a unified pool, and others want to split it up a lot more. And they're all really just decisions that depend on the family. But that doesn't mean that you can't have a very cohesive, connected family purpose that keeps you all coming to the Thanksgiving table and keeps you all loving each other and active as a family unit. The third step is to deal with the family business, if there is one there, and to understand what is going to happen with that, whether family members are going to play a leadership role in the family business in the future. That's really important. Is there a family member that is passionate about the family business and also competent to be able to take it over? And one of the cases that I dealt with, in actual fact, the father had for a long time thought his eldest son would take over the family business, and in fact, it was the daughter, the middle child, that was more passionate and skilled to take it over, and that's what she really wanted to do, and the son didn't. And and unlocking some of the belief systems and expectations that have been built up around that was really crucial to for moving forward. In other cases, it's just the patriarch who may have founded a business has to accept the business needs to be sold, and that's a better thing to do while he's in control of that, because the kids aren't interested. I've got a client in Australia where that's the case, and a year ago he sold a major pest control business because his 3 children aren't interested. They're not interested in the investment part of it either. So that's just the best way to go. So once you get all that sorted out, then we can get into the succession planning, which is really then the bringing together of who the family members are, their different emotions, and then putting numbers to it and creating that, estate plan, succession plan, investment plan, and putting the investment policy statements with much greater knowledge of who everybody is and at an individual level and where the family wants to be. Something that I also think is important is to have, particularly for bigger families, where they've got the financial resources to do it, and there's probably going to be more pieces to the puzzle as well. Is to have a what I call a family governance council, and really this is a formed under a charter that's written out for the family as to how decisions are going to be made, who's going to be involved, and really acts in a way as a board of advisors to the family unit to keep the family on track. And this can also be, a role that helps the patriarch in making day-to-day decisions and keeping him on track, and not making poor decisions later in life, and frankly, just for managing the wealth. And so I think a family governance council's a very positive, sound platform for helping the family in the future, and particularly, you never know when someone is going to die, so having that put in place then just makes the whole wealth transition easier, so there isn't the vacuum in the family unit. And then really part 6 is then just how do you keep everybody together, coming to the table, having family meetings on a regular basis is important. It's difficult when everyone is spread all over the country, whether they're at college, got their own individual family lives, but some way getting everybody together at least once a year to have a family meeting and discuss what's going on, look at the financials at a high level are all important steps. So that's the overall process. Here are some questions that can be asked for the family unit, and particularly of the patriarch, because a lot of the time these processes are initiated at that level, although I've had situations where it's been one of the adult children who have come to me and said, I think our family really needs to go through a process to protect itself. And that will happen when they see other families dissipate and have huge problems that are in their circle. And so, these are some of the questions that we might ask the patriarch, to get the conversation going. They're in a way fairly simple questions, but they are quite difficult. And what you will often find is the patriarch has been walking the journey by himself, or if it's the matriarch, by herself. At some level, yes, there will have been accounting and legal help, but to some degree, they haven't got that level of sounding board help that they should have. The will and accounting has been looked at very sort of technically, and without the level of human emotion input that is needed.
And add one more question to the bunch, and we'll throw this out to the viewers here. So family continuity is building sustainable relationships across generations for. And select one or more of the following, and what answer best fits the definition that we covered a little earlier, or where your thoughts are on family continuity so far. And we'll get a good cross-section of respondents, and see where we land, and share the results. Pretty much, all of the above really fit. A couple of those may fit better than others, but we want to make sure that we're rounding out all 4 of those parts as part of the definition and what we're covering as far as family continuity. Go ahead and hide this and be on our way. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad that all of you are looking at this holistically. That's what the result really brings out. And, whilst the numbers individually are a little bit lower on living a quality life for the family, that's important. So I think looking at this holistically, which is what all of you are doing, is great. And I'm sure that I didn't need to influence your thinking on that. My role is to help you with a process. So, getting into the syntax of it and to looking at how financial DNA is deployed. What we do in the discovery phase is we evaluate each family member through completion of their financial DNA discovery process. We're looking at as well what their individual aptitudes, interests, competencies are. That's just generally speaking in life, but also with money. We would also put every advisor to the family, who's in the broader sounding board, or potentially would be in the Family Governance Council. We would put them through their hoops with this as well, because it's important to understand where their perspectives are coming from, their advice as well. So as much, that the family member's behaviour is important, the family can eat the behaviour of the advisory team as well. This is where we can be looking for whether the outside help might be needed, particularly if some kind of therapist is needed because there is a mental health issue or some other struggle inside the family unit that's exposing a blockage. But most of the families we work with don't really need that help, and we're pretty clear about identifying that up front, as I said before. So once we've got the discovery phase done and every individual has been met with by the facilitator independently, and so that the facilitator then can really hear more about who they are and what they want and what they think of the family and where they see the issues, then we can organise the family meeting. There may well be some additional coaching and mentoring, whether it's of the family patriarch or matriarch or a family member, to get them ready to be at the family meeting, because obviously what you don't need is everybody exploding in the family meeting and having hidden issues just suddenly come out and derail the process. So preparation is absolutely important, and then we can get to the facilitation of building the family continuity plan around the family's purpose. And so just looking at it a little bit more in depth here, what we are after is the family purpose, which is going to be really a reflection of who all the family members are. What the family history is also very important in there, and that would be carried down by the matriarch and the patriarch and laying that out. Of course, the younger family members have to, define their own lives and take their own experiences, and that be blended in as well. But there's a lot in the melting pot there that needs to be addressed to build a family purpose. One of the things that we also do is we have a process to help uncover, what are all the family differences and where the different thinking's coming in the family, and then what also the different attitudes to wealth creation are in the family. As I said earlier, my brother and I have very different attitudes to wealth creation and risk-taking versus security, what we would want to see out of the wealth transfer process. Again, the patriarch, depending on how much money is there, may have the attitude that his kids are getting, an equal share of everything, or there could be special needs to be dealt with in there. And there could also be the patriarch who feels like, a couple of $1 million or whatever for each family member is enough, so that they have the basics to buy a house and educate their kids, but they're not going to spoil them anymore. And I've got a mentor of mine in my life who his kids don't know what he has, and he's told them that they're getting nothing, although privately he will say they are all going to get their share of the pot. But his objective there was to encourage them to go out and do something purposeful and meaningful in their lives, rather than hanging around waiting for an inheritance to come. Dealing with the plan giving and the establishment of foundations is important. what gets done with the family business, and then the governance structure. So with financial DNA, this is a behavioural discovery process, or I can use the word psychometric process, that I started developing 15 years ago with the help of a group of psychologists and behavioural specialists. And our goal is to uncover and get a very reliable prediction of a person's long-term thinking, behaviours, how they make decisions under pressure over time, whether that's through different life and market events. We really want to get to the person's automatic decision-making biases. That's the root foundation for us, because we believe that 95% of how a person makes decisions really comes from here, and then of course then there's the learned behaviours. So we're just taking a much more concrete, formalised route that's quite quick to do now. We've really streamlined our process over the years to get it pretty, the first step at least to be done very quickly, to get a read on who each family member is. Now, one of the key, before Trip jumps on, one of the key points of this is that why we do it in a family setting is it builds more engagement if everybody completes it, but importantly, it takes out facilitator bias. Now every family member has completed an independent process. They have done exactly the same thing. Whereas if it's just a facilitator meeting with each family member independently, the questions can be different. One will be wondering, well, what has the other person been asked, and how did that conclusion come about, and where did it come from? Whereas when something concrete like financial DNA is done, and it's going to be laid out there in front of everybody, it's equal, that level of mutuality builds a lot of trust. Whether the family members know some of this themselves, or I've had the odd facilitator say over time, well, I think this is a little bit in your face, but it's very trust building when everybody can complete something highly objective and it's equal for everyone, and that is a really big point. So I will bring Trip back on for the next question.
Just a quick question here, kind of a review, but do you understand how natural behavior impacts personality and decision making? And it's the basis of natural behavior, of our discussions and earlier topics that we cover, but this just allows everyone to chime in, see where we all are, or maybe. And if we need to review any more of that, we're open to questions and suggestions, and have other capabilities to cover things later on. But we've got a good cross section here. Let's take a look. Okay, so a good many of us are good about natural behavior, but certainly some questions remain out there. Always open to fielding questions, whether it's here or some of our other. We do cover, another webinar does cover the natural personalities and risks involved as an entry level piece, but happy to discuss those afterwards as we move along. Thank you very much.
I think also, while we're at that point, given there is a few of you that there is a slight lack of clarity, and that's between, as to the role of natural behavior and personality, and that's fair enough. It's a big point. It's foundational. I think it would be not good for me to leave this without saying a little bit more that the natural behavior is the genetic, hardwired behavior that is a combination of who you are when you're born and the first 3 years of your life, and that really reflects the neural pathway structure inside your brain. It's very deep and fixed, and it's been scientifically proven now, not to change throughout a person's life, and it is where they're going to flip to when they're under pressure. And of course, dealing with a family dynamic situation and thinking about long-term financial decision making, it always puts everybody under pressure. But your overall personality is dynamic in the sense that it will change depending on some of the environmental experiences you have, shifts in values in education. And so that's where everybody at a particular time or phase of their life will have certain different preferences or will be able to modify their natural behaviour, and that's what is reflected as the learned situational behaviour. So inside of all of us, there are really the two components of behaviour, but we take it that the natural behaviour is absolutely foundational. Yeah, we do talk more about that in our mainline training. So if I take a case study, and here's the Williams family, I've changed the names for the innocent. This was a fairly wealthy family that had in real life more than $100 million of assets. But as I said before, whether you're dealing with a family with just a few million or dealing with a family with $1 billion, a lot of the principles here are the same. And so the family had this mix of assets here. They had the family home. There's quite a lot of properties and equity investments. There was a profitable business that John here, the father, had founded, and then they had already set up a foundation. Of course, in their view, they had a great family life, governed by entertainment, excitement, entitlement, and expectation. And so they're the 4 E's that need to be dealt with, because this exists inside every family, even if it appears to be peaceful. He's around 65 years old, and he is ready to start retiring and moving to the next phase of his life. The parents want to distribute the wealth, possessions, and responsibilities equitably. So they want to get to a fair result across the 3 children. They want to communicate their values, and they want to have common ground for the family purpose and mission. And the framework that we addressed, the transition planning, family continuity planning in, was to make the relationship continuity the priority, because if that is flawed, then pretty well everything else will be flawed. Values continuity, so John and his wife Mary were keen to pass down their values, and then it's dealing with the family business, the finances, and the philanthropy. For John, historically, until we came along, building a will was really a legal process, and sitting down with a lawyer and somewhat dumping out, well, I'd like this to happen, I'd want that to happen, and I need some generation skipping trusts to deal with education. As my mother brought up the other day, she wants to buy a house for each of the grandchildren, etc., etc. All this stuff starts to flow out, and then how does it get legally documented? So the point being here, it's very easy for John, the founder, because he controls the money, although in real life his wife was also independently wealthy, just to go and write their own will and be somewhat ignorant of what everybody else is thinking and feeling. And that was somewhat what we walked into here. And the reality is everybody has to live with the choices that he makes. And is he really aware of what every family member feels and thinks? And so that is very important. So, building the will is not just a rational legal process. We've got to get to understand, what the perceptions are of the family member, and then build a plan from that. And of course, the will be fairly easy to draft once you actually have a solid family continuity plan and know where every family member stands. So in terms of the financial DNA styles, each family member has completed their financial DNA natural behavior discovery process. There was also some other profiles they completed, but to keep it simple, this is what they completed, and we can see their individual styles here. No shock. John is an influencer, which is what many entrepreneurs are. Mary is a stylish thinker. Interesting in real life, they're both outgoing, and she's quite planned and structured. Actually, a few behavioural clashes between the two of them, but not an unusual thing for husband and wife, given that opposites attract. You don't often get the husband and wife being exactly the same style. Certainly not out of the first marriage. And that's where the strengths can be wonderful, and the differences can be a struggle, and the money goes with that as well. And then they've got the 3 children here. Brian, similar to his dad, but a bit more introverted. The daughter as well, not dissimilar to the brother. And then you've got somewhat the black sheep of the family, George down here, who's polar opposite certainly to his siblings. Some similarities to the mother. Not an unusual mix of behaviours inside the family. In terms of natural behaviour, we don't make any rules about birth order because, in other families I've dealt with, the profile like George's is the first child, and the one, say, like Sarah's or Brian's is the last child. The natural behaviour comes in any mix of orders, so there's no assumptions we make in relation to that. That's not to say that there aren't birth order issues and that the middle child lives through being a little bit more ignored. The first child could be left to their own devices a bit, and the last child's protected. These things all happen, but they're not natural behaviour based. They're situational issues. Then the next thing that we do is that we take a family group. We prepare a family group report and overlay all of the family profiles so that we can start to see how everybody fits together. And what I'm going to show you here is it just sort of illuminates for the family as well. This is really what you want to show the family, is how they are all different. And what we try to uncover is what their strongest behavioural traits are, because that's what's going to govern their decision making and their thought patterns. So the dad is pretty spontaneous, but he's a risk taker. Mum is pretty outgoing. George is very outgoing there and quite trusting. He's the black sheep. And then you've got Sarah, creative, fast-paced, and Brian, skeptical, reserved, and Mum, anchored and cooperative. So you've got a mixture of behaviours there that need to be brought together. And we can see 3 of them are very results-focused and 2 are more relational. So the 3 who are results-focused will be thinking about the bottom line of it, whereas the 2 who are more relational, will be looking at the family relationship first over the money. When you blend all the factors together, it's a pretty fast-paced family and quite spontaneous in their decision-making, so it's somewhat lacking structure there. Interesting here, they like flamboyant, they like to spend money. They all want their own freedoms, and there can be some impulsivity there. But at the same time, they're very bottom line orientated as a family unit. As I said, the mix of behaviours will differ very much depending on the families. The slides I have now, I'm not here to train you on human behaviour today, but it does start to bring out where the family relationships sit. It's good to look for the similarities across the family members, where they sit and what their thinking will be, and to what the differences might be in the family. And you can see here, for example, George is very, very outgoing and relational versus his brother Brian, who's far more reserved, introverted, and focused there. Patience is an interesting one, and then there's some big gaps there. And then the structure and the trust levels are a little bit down in the family as well, so a bit more to the skeptical side in the family. So getting them together in consensus and holding them there will be important over time. And then on this graph, we can see they're fairly driven and being pioneering and goal-orientated, risk-taking, creative. The interesting thing in here really is that George is, as I said before, is somewhat the black sheep. He's the one who's more dramatically different to everybody else, and in real life was a little bit of a thorn in the side of his father for that reason. They just didn't emotionally connect because his father was a hard-charging bull, and George was more interested in people, wasn't interested in the business side of things. So that created for some differences inside the family unit. We also work on how does everybody going to communicate and what their behavioural finance biases are, which will be important to the financial decision making. fair. So that's what we're bringing out in the process. So, in facilitating the family, it's important that every family member is met with first before a family meeting is held. Just don't dump everybody into a family meeting and expect it to go well. Every family member has to be given equal attention, and they have to feel that. There can't be any bias in this process if it's going to be successful. You want everybody talking and be comfortable to, reveal what they think the strengths and struggles of the family are, what their concerns are. At the end of the day is to remove misperceptions. And there will always be something that comes out for mum and dad to be thinking about that they've got to take on board. And remember, the patriarch and the matriarch are the leaders of the family, and they're the ones who, I believe in the principle of leader goes first. Whilst they might think in some areas their children are ungrateful, it's up to them to some degree to remove the misperceptions. They're the leader. They've got to make themselves vulnerable first and be comfortable doing that. If they can do that and eat a bit of humble pie on a few things, decisions that might have got made along the way, of course, depending on the family journey, then that's going to help and bring the children to the table.
And just a quick poll question here for everybody. See where opinions fall. What percentage of family businesses survive to the second generation? And we'll see, got 4%, 25%, 30%, 57%. And we'll see, get a good cross-section here, and we'll see what the actual results are. What the research says. Let's see. We'll share those results. So pretty much 56%, 30% is correct. Research shows that about 30% of family businesses survive to the second generation. Might have some differences in there in your own experience, but as we've seen some of the answers across the board here, but just kind of good to know. Thank you very much.
And as we said earlier on, a lot of that is when the business transfers fail within the family, and that's the desire to transfer the business. It does come down to family communication. The points I've got here at the bottom under note are really important. The whole reason that we have a very concrete process with financial DNA is to make it equal across the family and to depersonalize it. And that is, I believe, vital to the success of this type of process for it to work longer term. We also have an additional process, which is a family performance 360 discovery, where we is really more getting to the family members' perceptions and perspectives of the family unit, and it's really a process to gather. It's almost like a survey to gather what each family member thinks of the family and where it's at in across these types of areas. And so that also helps then the facilitator see where the gaps are. This is intended to be done anonymously, so you won't know what each family member has said, but it will show where the family members perceive particular areas to be strong or to be weak, and they can become conversations when you have that family meeting. What happened in the Williams family in the end, having gone through a process like this, is that the business was retained, the equity in it was split three ways, but control was given to Sarah to run the business. She was paid a market-based salary and performance bonus for doing that, so it was, on similar terms if a hired gun had been brought into the family, and she had the skills and competency to do that. The family all accepted that. The remuneration of a family member in a business is a big issue as well, in making sure that there is equity between, separating out the shareholding versus the day-to-day management and control. Brian was more interested in dealing with the family property and equities. Again, split up three ways, but control given to him, and he was paid, market-based salary for running the family office. Family foundation was George's area, and so he was, given that area to run. He was very passionate about it, and again, he was paid what was fair for him there. And Mum kept retention of the family home. She had other assets as well. So that's how it was divvied up. But of course, it's also important to ensure the mother is not put in a place of being removed from the family home. That is a very big emotive issue that has to be always dealt with and consideration given to. So when we're dealing with family continuity, building the family corporate governance structure, we have to blend in everything. We have to ensure there is the right balance and control between what is the shareholding interest of the family versus the operational day-to-day management of the family business as well, and preserving the family interests. And that's where a family governance council or process is important to have and lay out the rules. So what are the next steps that that we offer? And if any of you are thinking about working with a family, we would encourage you having family members complete financial DNA, see what the results are, and even if you want to be the facilitator, we're more than happy to be a backstop there and help you understand what the family mix of profiles are, what questions would you ask the family, how would you run the process, set up a full-scale family continuity program. And partly why I also bring this out is that quite a lot of the financial advisors that come and get trained in financial DNA are always looking for ways, well, how can I make money out of using financial DNA, and how can I get a retainer-based income from working with the families that I do? And I believe that this provides the foundation for doing it. One of our very successful wealth mentors, Mike Peduzzi, runs a company called Da Vinci Global Consulting. I've worked with Mike for the last 15 years since I came to the United States, and we've developed some services around being the CEO and advisory board member for the Family Governance Council, creating Rising Leaders and Rising Generations Forum discussion groups where family members can come and discuss in confidence the issues inside their family. To hear what others have got to say. Of course, that is confidential. Mike's developed some very good technology for retention of all the family documents and information, from passwords to the investments to absolutely everything, tax returns, accounts, whatever is going to, underpins the family's existence there. And then again, Roots and Wings program for helping the younger family members just sort of, get familiar with dealing with wealth and money. It's more of a financial education program.
And one last question for everybody, as we're talking about other topics, what other topics might you be interested in as we present so many month to month, looking for your input and continuing your education?
So that concludes our presentation today. We're more than happy to have any questions that you might have now, or feel free to contact us. We will reach out to check in whether you have any questions. The recording will be available as well. We have plenty of resources at DNA Behaviour in our websites, but also on our blog site, that addresses this area and generally speaking, the deployment of financial DNA. So I encourage you to take advantage of all of that. If any of you have not completed financial DNA yet, please feel free to go to our website, financialdna.com. And there is a spot there where you can log in and self-register and complete your own financial DNA. So I know all of you are interested in helping families have a better quality of life, so hopefully I've shown you a great methodology for working on it. It is a journey. It's not waving the magic wand. It's hard work for you as the facilitator and for the family, but it's one that's tremendously rewarding to be there, in the end, their wealth mentor.
And that concludes our webinar. Thank you, everybody, for your time.